I'm so excited to see you, Kate. This is
Always
so fun.
Excited to see your face.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It was like, I have to have you on this podcast because I feel like we have such meaningful conversations.
I feel like we've had podcasts already.
We
just haven't recorded them.
I know. So we just need to record them every time.
We'll keep the phone out.
Yeah, keep the phone out. Exactly. But I remember meeting you, I guess it was through Trek meeting you and just always seeing you with a big smile on your face, just the most positive person, so energetic, and I just love you, and I'm so happy that you're in my life.
Me too. And that was such a special first lunch or breakfast. Yes. It was breakfast, and it was just, I have chills thinking about just what a blessing it is when you connect on that level immediately. But you are so immediately authentic. And just open that line for it to be the same. And why not just go straight to the real stuff?
Absolutely.
You know?
And I think I felt just a level of kind of comfort and safety with you from the get-go. Just felt
nice
like I could share anything with you. And I think, so yeah, we went and had coffee and we just started talking and things got really personal really quickly about struggles we've had in our lives and
big stuff. Stuff you don't just blurt out.
Yeah, big stuff. And it was the first time we were like sitting down and actually talking and meeting. And we both of us were crying by the end of it.
We were. And what a start.
I know.
That usually takes, I don't know how long that usually takes people, but it usually takes a long time.
Yeah, it usually does. So it was just really refreshing. And it's just, I feel like we immediately get there every time we see each other. So
I do too.
It's just fun to have you on the podcast. So, okay, so tell me where it all began. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
So that would take us a long, long time. I didn't grow up in one place. I grew up all over the place. I was born in Hawaii, which I left when I was 3, but I swam before I walked. I later ended up back in Hawaii clerking for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, which is set up a little bit like the Indian Reservation Bureau. And I met my first husband there and got married there and later honeymooned with Chip, who I'm married to now. That remains a very special place. And maybe that's my connection to water. But between Hawaii and now, I have moved. Dallas was my 22nd move.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And then my girls and I moved 5 times in Dallas because we were renting for a while. I was a single mom for 12 years. So Dallas has become home. I've lived here since 2004, and that I've lived here 4.5 times as long as I've lived anywhere else.
Wow.
So East Coast, West Coast, Okinawa, Japan, Hawaii, Texas, lots of time in the Southeast. So a little bit of all over.
And why were you moving so much?
My father was a Marine officer. My first husband, who grew up here in Dallas, was a Marine officer. So that was the life I knew until I was 32.
Wow. And so since you moved so often, were you ready to kind of settle down and put some roots down? Or do you still have the urge to move?
Both.
Yeah.
The grass is always greener. And there were tremendous opportunities when you move that much and exposure and what you learn to adapt to. I always wanted to say things like I grew up with, or as I got older, I knew my dry cleaner, or I had my favorite bakery, or those relationships. I always craved those long relationships. And I still have relationships with people from years and years ago that I haven't seen in years, but still keep up with. But that part of it was hard. There's still an urge in me. What I do now is actually move furniture.
That's a good way to do it.
Instead of moving.
Yeah, then change your environment.
Yeah, change an environment.
A little bit cheaper.
And life goes enough directions that I'm fine. The older you get, the less you want to do things like pick up and go. But there's still that sense in me of wanting to go explore. Like, what's next?
Right. So Hawaii obviously has a special place. Is there any other place that you moved in between Hawaii and Dallas that has a special place as well?
It is Beaufort, South Carolina.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Well, I say that because I grew up in Georgia. And so I've been to, Beaufort is a very special place.
Precious, precious, precious. We were there 3 years and it still runs through my veins. I've been back. I mean, the live oaks and the Spanish moss with the smell of marsh and pine, and we lived on one of the islands, had a boat. It was just a beautiful, beautiful place.
What island did you live on?
We lived on Ladies Island.
Okay.
So it's the first one over the bridge from that precious, precious downtown.
Yes, that has all my favorite piece of jewelry I actually bought in a small store in Beaufort. It's this Art Deco necklace that I love and get so many compliments on. But that town, when I visited, we actually went for a wedding the last time I went there. And I was like, I think I want to retire here.
That is the sense. It is interesting in that it is typically Southern, and you could say backward in a lot of ways, yet still I loved it. You know, and I can fight provincialism and what I consider to be vanilla white in my own neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Yet I did fall in love with that place.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned you have 2 daughters.
I do. Ashley is 29. Emma is 25. Every time I say that, I shake my head and go, how? 29. Wow.
Yeah.
And I had, kids. I had an 8-year-old when I was 29.
Yes.
An 8-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I say wow too.
Yeah. And okay, so where did you go to school?
A&M.
You went to A&M, that's right.
Whoop.
A&M. Yeah. And what did you study at A&M?
It was a double major poli-sci journalism.
Okay. And then you got into marketing, right? Or business development?
Well, business development now.
Yeah.
I ended up in nonprofit when the kids were younger, and I was president of the Wives Club and a professional volunteer, not working full time. And then I ended up in ministry part time as a Christian education director for 2 different churches. And then when I got a divorce, that did not pay the bills, and I worked for the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Kingsville, Texas, which is still, I believe, the only Texas city losing population.
Wow.
For a year. And then I ended up in Dallas. And I ended up by a single mom who's desperate for a job, took a job at a real estate developer, small family developer, Hank Dickerson and Company, who used to be one of the biggest brokerage houses, if not the biggest brokerage houses back in the doodah days in the 80s, until everything fell apart. And the youngest son, who's now my neighbor, took it into a development company. And I was jack of all trades and expert of none, and closed our real estate deals, worked with counsel, worked with engineers, zoning, learned it all, worked on leases, and just wasn't enough for me growth-wise with people. My energy came from people.
Right.
And so I just happened to know Melissa Eastman from dropping our kids off at camp, and we were the only 2 women in suits on the sidelines, the soccer fields in Park Cities. And I took her to lunch in September and got a call in November and said yes.
Wow. So clearly you come across as someone who has a ton of drive. I feel like you're always just working so hard. I feel like you've had such a hard work ethic. Where do you think that comes from? Do you think, when just telling the story that you're telling right now, just about how divorced and single mother, and, did that drive a lot of that energy, or what's really behind that?
I think, some of us have the opportunity through pain or desire or both to do a lot of work. And I've done a lot of work around that question. What is my motivation? And a lot of it is just, you and I have talked Enneagram before. Enneagram's been a great tool for me to understand my motivations and where they were formed and when they were formed. And we all are a product of early childhood, but I am an achiever, and I'm driven to achieve in the healthiest way and the unhealthiest way. And sometimes that drive is motivated to help others, to serve, to do the right thing. And sometimes that drive is motivated to validate my self-worth, to get done for something for other people or make an impression or measuring myself on what's done. As a 3 on the Enneagram, Western ideals really value what 3s do. We're image conscious. We want to get it done. We are the doers, very often leaders. But whether that's good or bad really depends on what's your motivation for doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I find that to be very, very interesting because I'm, is it a 9, the peacemaker? Yeah.
You're a 9.
I'm a 9, which I'd never resonated so much with something before in my life. Like I've done the Strength Finders, I've done all these other things, and the Enneagram, I read it and I was like, whoa, that is
it's very
totally
different.
Me. Yes.
It's very, very different. And the deeper you go with it, the more, it's very trendy right now, which is both fortunate and unfortunate.
Right.
But it is an incredible tool for really working on who you are, where you go to in strength and where you go to in health. I actually go to 9 in unhealth.
Really?
I take on the being paralyzed and apathetic. And what that looks like for me is on the couch binge watching something.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, for me, I'm a healthy 9, but the things I have to work on is I am such a people pleaser and such a peacemaker that oftentimes I will do something on behalf of somebody else instead of for myself.
Being true to yourself.
And so I can lose myself or suffer because of it. So I do think it's a really powerful tool to help you kind of understand yourself on a deeper level and work towards understanding like this is unhealthy, this is healthy, and how you can see the in between and how to get
to know yourself better and use those. Because it's very often the things we do, whether you're speaking in Enneagram speak or not, are not good or bad. Are they good for us is very much depends on our motivation. And lots of us, for various reasons, lose ourselves. I, for instance, value efficiency so much, feelings are not efficient. And I will abandon those and I'll stay busy not to deal with them. Well, that gets in the ways. As a healthy 3, I'm authentic. But if I'm doing that gets in the way of authenticity and in the way of vulnerability because I'm so focused on having it all together that I forget I don't.
Right. Right. And it's okay to not. And it's okay to sit and feel it. And it's actually much healthier that way.
Right. There is value. I finally not just know, I've known it for years, but I believe it in being versus doing. And it is so often in the being that we grow.
Yes, for sure. I am reading Amy Cuddy's book, Presence. Have you read this?
I haven't. Another one on the list. You should see that list, Emily. It's so long.
Sure.
I think I have books on that list you gave me 2 years ago.
Well, this book is validating a lot of things that I have discovered through these conversations. And it's a lot of, the book is called Presence, right? So it's all about what we're talking about right now. And what I find to be so fascinating is this is becoming so valued in our society, in our workplaces, in our friend groups, which I'm really optimistic about.
And when you say presence, being present, very good.
Yes, being present. And because you're being present, you understand yourself better and you understand other people better. So you're more empathetic. It grows better leaders. It just helps you thrive and live kind of the life that you're supposed to live. I find that to be just absolutely fascinating.
I do too. And what I love on the emphasis on these things, if they're presented, and it sounds like this book is that this isn't just self-improvement.
Right.
This is what we're created to be and do. And when we are acting in a capacity that we're created for, we're going to serve others as we get to know ourselves. This isn't just about making us better. This is widely for the greater good, for community and a collective consciousness of it, if you will.
Yes. And that's what I find to be so inspiring and encouraged by it. Yeah, because this chapter is called Believing and Owning Your Story. So it's believing in yourself and owning it and having the confidence to move through the world kind of as your best self.
And pausing long enough to even know what your story is.
Yes.
You asked about dreams and aspirations, and I thought, well, that's a new one for me. Because if you don't slow down long enough to pause and squint your eyes, as you put it,
right,
you don't know what those dreams or aspirations are. It's a foreign word.
Right.
At 51, dreams are just starting to reappear as a possibility in my life.
So when do those go away for you?
That is a very good question. And I probably I think it's my personality for them not to be there, because I am always doing the next thing in front of me. And that efficiency does not play to long term, right? I think the childhood dreams that I've rediscovered, and I will be very vulnerable and share what it is to be a singer on a stage singing to tons of people.
I love that.
And making
so
them
much.
happy. I'm sure threes love applause, so, but it's more about connecting with people and sharing the gift of music and my love for music. I did sing in a cover band, by the way, in my 30s.
I love this.
That has just been something that's reignited. But I think I don't know that I ever had more than that. As a younger person, I had dreams of being on Capitol Hill and changing the world. I did dream of Africa. Actually, that is a book that has actually been realized. So there are a few, but when you just think about someone asks you that question, what could you do without restraints? If there was anything you wanted to do, that's a dream. I struggle with that one.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with that one. I'm doing some work right now to really think about that, because what we have to wonder, right? And wondering takes being still.
Mm-hmm.
And to wonder is a gift. And life is so much richer if we wonder. So I'm just starting to kind of revisit that. So maybe you can be my accountability partner, and in a year ask me what's going on the dream front.
Yeah, absolutely. I will totally do that.
I know you will.
So tell me about this cover band and the.
Oh my gosh. Really? So we were in Kingsville, Texas. There wasn't a lot to do. These were the fighter pilots my ex-husband was a fighter pilot. These guys were musicians, and they were in bands, and like good bands at some point in college, and they all got together, and they needed a female vocalist, and one of the guys who'd put it together knew I could sing. And so we started playing, and there wasn't many places to go. There was a bar and the officers club. And so my favorite thing to cover was actually Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses.
I mean, of course it is. I could totally see you belting that out.
I still do in the car.
Yes, as you should.
So that was my, one little stint of, and we'd stop playing at 1:30, and I was like, can we play 3 more hours? I just loved it.
I love that. Well, my daughter, my oldest daughter, she sings nonstop. So y'all are going to have to talk. You're going to have to meet her.
There's so much joy in it. She's just got to keep singing.
Yeah,
you've got to keep singing.
She loves it. So do you play any other instruments?
I was afraid you were going to ask that, because I was going to have to admit that for 2 years, it's been on my list to resume playing the baby grand that's sitting in my living room.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and I haven't done it yet. So just the piano. I tried to pick up guitar because I thought I could translate easily. It is so hard for my brain. It's like when I took Spanish in high school, because I learned Spanish in college. I wrote an essay that was partly in French because I couldn't transition. I can't transition the piano to guitar, so I gave up. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you could pull that back up. And I mean, the piano for sure. That is, because that's the foundation to everything, right? That's where everybody starts.
I wrote music when I was younger, and my first song I wrote, Sandcastles was the name of it. And I put that to music on the piano, and then gave it to my chorus teacher, and she put the chords in, and then we actually sang it for our whole school. But that's where I would write my music, and I don't really do that anymore. I still write, but I don't write the poetry and the prose and the music I used to. And so that might be a good place to start on the dream front, now that we're talking about it.
Yeah, that's a gift because not everybody has that capacity. Like I actually play the guitar. I've played since I was in
Didn't know
seventh grade,
that.
but I'm not very good, and maybe I just don't have the patience to sit and actually write a song and all the parts and pieces that are required to make it a real legitimate song.
Well, I would encourage you to maybe not think about making it legitimate.
Yeah, okay, maybe
And just
not.
write a song.
That's a good.
I think that's probably part
That's
of my problem too.
yeah.
Is now, mind you, I didn't say any of these were good,
Well,
but I'm learning that I can still do things and enjoy them, even if the end product is not what I consider
yes,
good.
absolutely. Well, I think it again goes all back to just having the time and prioritizing the time to allow yourself to live out that dream. So yes, I'm going to hold you accountable to that for sure.
Yeah. And nobody will give us that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody
You've got
will
to
give us the
prioritize it.
time. We can take that time and give ourselves the time, and no one's responsible for that except us.
Right. And that is kind of an interesting lesson to learn because I think we all think that, well, at least I did for a while. I thought I didn't have that power.
Mm-hmm. That's the pleasing we do.
Yeah, pleasing.
I have to do work and the kids and the nonprofit and everything else. I have to take care of everybody else. I don't have a choice.
Right.
We always have a choice.
Right. And once you realize that, things will change. And I think right now, with the great resignation that's happening right now, I think a lot of people have had more time on their hands, whether most of it was forced, obviously, with COVID, to be able to have a moment to think and put everything in perspective.
And we had a change of environment. And very often that change of environment, even if we didn't end up with more time, we ended up with different time.
Yes.
And it opens our eyes so that because things are no longer rote. We're not going to the same place, the same office, the same people doing the same thing. And it gave us a pause just by putting us in our home office or our bedroom or whatever it was.
Yes.
To rethink.
That is, I hadn't really thought about it, but that is exactly right. Because I keep saying you have more time, but we didn't have more time. It was just, it changed.
I didn't.
The time just changed. The allocation of time
and
changed.
What we could and couldn't do changed.
Yes. And so you kind of get out of your normal habits and it breaks that momentum. So it makes you stop and think what's happening. That's interesting.
And for those of us who don't slow down, there were so many things we couldn't do with others.
Yeah.
So we did end up with more time to either work or think or be.
Yes. I had a lot less time in my car driving all over the place. And that was really nice.
The pace was the biggest change for me.
Yes.
And I think that was the healthiest thing.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to, I know that your faith is a really important part of who you are and what defines kind of what you do and how you spend your time. Have you always been involved with the church? Did you grow up in the church?
I grew up in the Catholic Church and I grew up praying, certainly. I didn't read the Bible. And I kind of had this relationship with God of like I did with human beings of pleasing and feeling like I needed to be good and very guilty if I wasn't and very unloved if I didn't perform. That was very, very early. That changed very gradually. It was in college that a friend who was in a Christian men's fraternity shared Christ with me. And my faith is a Christian faith. And I ended up crying on the floor in my dorm, overwhelmed with the fact that someone loved me enough to die for my sins and forgive me. And it blew me away.
Yeah.
To be that loved. Because what I'd always wanted was to be loved. And what I always wanted, my biggest fear is to be unworthy.
Right.
And the fact that I was worthy, period, and that had nothing to do with me was extraordinary. It's still extraordinary to me. I still struggle with that. But over the years, that grew and I was leading Bible studies. I think my first one, I was on bed rest for 7 months with my youngest, and I led a Bible study from my bed because I couldn't be that cut off from the world.
Wow.
And then I ended up in ministry. I would say when my faith became the beginning of the most authentic it's been was when I quit drinking. I'm an alcoholic. I've been in recovery for 17 years. It'll be 18 in March. And like most, I had a catalytic event that, caused a lot of pain. It was a bottom. And it's a bottom I am very thankful for. I'm thankful for bottoms in general.
Mhm.
I think human beings have to generally hit bottoms of some sort in whatever arena it is to change. Hopefully, the older we get, the wiser we get. Those bottoms are not as painful or as long. But that prompted me to seek recovery and really admit what was going on. And that honesty and that willingness was huge and opened up a whole new world for me and opened up a whole new relationship with God that had an open-mindedness that I had not had before.
Wow.
And since then, we've just, it's been an ongoing growth. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward and, 1 step back. And you pull back the onion layers as you grow. And I will think that I've really done a deep dive into a part of my spiritual growth. And then 4 months later, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so stagnant there. And you just keep growing. There's no end to it when there is, for me, or I think for anyone, a power greater than yourself, who I see as creator, and certainly not God as a puppet that orchestrates everything down here. We've been given free will, and it's a very broken world. And nor do I believe that all of faith can be explained.
Right.
And when people think they can't explain it, I get very nervous. But it is my worldview, and I can say this, that when I let, and I do often, other things trump that perspective, my busyness, work, even my nonprofit work that may be faith-based, even marriage or kids, when anything else trumps that as far as order and priority goes, there's not a lot of peace.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discontent.
And that to me goes back to the presence thing that we were talking about.
Agree.
I feel like those two are hand in hand, right?
Agree. And it takes discipline.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm not self-disciplined. I think I give that impression. I'm just driven. So if I don't happen to be driven at that moment, to be still, to be present. In fact, being still and being present is the opposite of being driven.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a hard thing to find, right?
It is. It doesn't seem like there should be a high priority with that.
Right.
And
but it's the highest.
It's the highest. So what do you think how did your life change after you got sober? And that's probably a loaded question, I'm sure.
I don't know how it didn't change.
Yeah.
I think my willingness to grow along spiritual lines was the biggest immediate change. I also think, and I utilized and still do a 12-step program. And part of that is honesty. Certainly the basis of it is being honest with yourself, but also taking ownership and of what's yours to take ownership for, the good and the bad, and living a life that makes amends to others when those wrongs are there immediately, small or large, and being responsible for your actions. And it's kind of a code of, I was so excited about these 12 steps when I first went under them. I told every one of my girlfriends about them. And one of my girlfriends was so enamored, she asked for the book. And I bought it for her. She's like, am I allowed to have this? I'm like, yeah, you are. Because it was just so much wisdom in it. And, some people just need steps with numbers. And I did. And it simplified things for me. I can overcomplicate anything and I can overanalyze anything. And so I would say those were the 2 biggest internal changes. And then, of course, that changes everything externally. From what I felt like perspective, I didn't feel like a fraud anymore. I had a double life. I was, spouse of the year for the Military Wives Club. I, was leading Sunday school, teaching Sunday school. And then, you're throwing down 2 bottles of wine and jeopardizing the lives of your kids as you drive drunk down, the highway, out till 2 a.m. It's hard to live two different lives.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting.
And the cycle of waking up and hating yourself and then drinking more so you don't have to feel that is exhausting as well.
Yeah, I can't
That
imagine.
was big.
Yeah.
That was big.
And I'm sure that was a big relief once you saw the steps and start working through those steps. I could see how just the magnitude of that, just taking it one step at a time, makes it just a little bit easier to move forward.
It does. And I will say this, it's it may be the greatest gift that God has allowed to be an alcoholic. Because I think we all have stories. I think we all can be storytellers. And I'm not funny, so I don't have those kinds of stories. But to tell the stories of our lives, to share the hardest parts, that's what speaks love, I think, into others the most.
Absolutely.
To share, the night you got pulled over, to share your alcoholism. For me, it's been everything from a suicide attempt to eating disorders to, and I can speak openly about this because she's open about it, my youngest daughter and her addiction, mental illness in my family. When we share those things, the crises of confidence, then we are willing to share our true selves for the benefit of another. And that's what you find in the rooms of recovery.
Yeah.
So it's taking those things and pouring them out for somebody else.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful for those things that kind of look like on paper to be the worst.
Because that is what, like you say, it opens other people up to be able to live their truths. And what a powerful way to impact people in such a positive way, to share your stories of pain. And that was the conversation that we had.
It is.
At our first meeting, because we both were opening up about mental illness and sharing our stories. And I think that's, why we connected in a way that
I do too. That transparency.
Otherwise. Yeah.
That transparency.
Yep.
And I think we all have to be respectful of time and place. You can't throw up on people's shoes.
Right.
It can't be about you. Right.
Right.
There's that genuine connection.
Right.
That's there.
Right.
But if we don't tell those stories, especially for people with personalities like mine, right, who have an unconscious proclivity or just my natural disposition is to succeed in whatever I'm doing. And I'm not motivated by money. So for me, it's not success in that way, but it is to get it done.
Right.
And it's to get it done well and the best I can, whatever it is. And so for those of us who really kind of project that image of we have it all together, I think it's even more important to share, no, we don't.
Right. No,
we don't.
Yes. And because I can imagine there's a lot of shame if you're a 3 and you're an achiever and all you want to do is succeed and be an example of success, and you've done some things that you're not proud of.
Right. From an image standpoint and from an internal standpoint.
Right. That could just hold, that could just make you be in pain forever. But instead
you
chose not to do that and to grow from it. And, others are better because of it.
And it's work. It's constant work.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had tremendous help. I'm a firm believer in therapy. I think we all need it. It's definitely a luxury.
Yes.
I wish it was more accessible and affordable for the world. I'm involved in a nonprofit that the core of it is trauma therapy. And interestingly enough, we started that in 2018. And during COVID, I started my own trauma therapy to revisit a lot of that pain that we've talked about from an early age. And as hard as that is, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. But sometimes I am faint of heart with it,
Right.
and that's okay too. I have also been thankful for every single one of these incidents. And they're hard. This goes back to sexual abuse when I was a very young child. But I am very thankful for that, and that this work I'm doing now is helping me understand what and identify with and empathize with these young girls in Africa who have experienced this and are
Right.
having children at 11. So again, it has been revealed to me, do the work.
Yeah,
Do the work and share the story, because it's not just about you.
exactly. And your story of healing and growing and overcoming and using that as your strength
Mhm.
is now helping these young girls, which is unbelievable.
It is to me too. It
That's
is
unbelievable.
to me too. Yeah.
So tell us more about that. Remind me of the name of the nonprofit.
The Kukoma Project.
Kukoma Project.
The Kukoma Project.
And
yeah.
how long have you been involved with this project?
We officially kicked off in 2018, as far as formation goes. I didn't know I was chairman of the board until we were, I think, officially formed. And I said, okay, so we really, our executive director and founder, and then in-country director, who's Zambian, and co-founder, had not done any other nonprofits. They were staff in a nonprofit, and that's where we all met, through another educational ministry in Zambia. But they hadn't been on boards, and so I was kind of explaining some things, and I said, no, we have to have a board chair. And Amanda, our executive director, says to me, I thought you were a board chair. And I was like, oh, I had no idea.
Congratulations.
Okay, here we go. So yeah, startup nonprofit in another country, no big deal.
Yeah.
So we are in 22. We're starting our 4th year. Our 2nd year of full operations. It's a 2-year program for girls 11 to 15 who are victims of defilement, rape, and are pregnant as a result of that. Our goal is to preserve life, the life of the mothers and the child's. The rate of infancy deaths in sub-Saharan Africa is extraordinary. As you can understand, young mothers having them. And the parameters for our girls are the toughest. We take the worst cases because there are so many cases. We had to narrow it down. But girls
Wow.
that are at risk of suicide or abortion or both, and most of our girls have attempted both, and abortion is illegal in Zambia. These are kind of scary jobs when it happens. But we incorporate the families into the program as well, caregivers that are not the abusers. And the first part of this is trauma counseling. And counseling is not widely available or popular in sub-Saharan Africa. We have one of 5 probably truly qualified counselors in the country, and I would argue the best. And our girls and our families receive that in group and individual counseling. And we facilitate the continuing of their education. We provide medical care, which they would not have had. We have an agreement with the local hospital, economic empowerment skills, and literacy. And our plan is to reintegrate each of these girls as mothers into their communities after working with them and their families, and empowering them economically if we're using agriculture as an example, a trade that is not dependent on the U.S. economy, but has a need always, and also provides subsistence for them. And there are partners that we are now in formation with to handle the kind of small business aspect of that. And we do a lot of training with the government and the social workers. We're the only maternity home and movement in Zambia. And this is what we're really uncovering, is the legacy of trauma. We talk about the cycle of poverty and the legacy of poverty.
Right.
I think more people are far familiar with that. And I think what I have learned is how much throughout sub-Saharan Africa and other countries where women are truly second-class citizens and are not given a voice, where this kind of abuse is normal, where mothers are not bad mothers, but know what's going on, and happening within the home, but she has 5 other children and she's economically dependent on the stepfather and she's afraid of retribution. And by the way, that's how she grew up. And it's how her mother before her grew up. The legacy of trauma is part of the legacy of poverty. And what I am learning in my own therapy directly, not just in the manual, if you can break that legacy of trauma, what can happen in ensuing generations is extraordinary.
Wow.
So, not to say that we don't need nonprofits that are providing food and strictly economic empowerment. We do, but from what I'm observing, if you don't address trauma in these situations, you're not addressing the issue.
Gosh, that's just unbelievable. And I remember because you invited me to an educational kind of opportunity to learn more about the project a couple of years ago. And I remember hearing the story about how these young girls will just be walking home from school or walking, down the street and would get attacked. And that is socially accepted.
And
normal. And I just cannot imagine.
And there were people in that instance who, pulled that person off, but then he was an uncle and he went to jail and he was released. There's certainly many factors at play there, criminal justice system, but you have to start somewhere. And I think what you and I both know experientially, that if this young girl doesn't believe in her value, her God-given value, we are faith-based and discipleship is also very key in the program. If she doesn't believe in her worth and her value, then how could you possibly convince the rest of a continent of that?
Right.
And so that's where we're starting.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, it is.
It's a miracle every day.
It really is, because it's a devastating issue. I'm so thankful for you all and the project and your time and investment in it, because it's just.
Well, it's a privilege. I mean, truly our community, I think, is all of those that we're connected to throughout this world. And if there's anything good about the internet, and there's a lot of good things, social media is not one of them, but
right.
It has made so clear to us that we are all in community.
Yes.
People ask me a lot, well, there's a lot going on here in Dallas. I'm like, you bet there is. And right. I spend a lot of time working with communities in Dallas, but I believe we have communities everywhere.
Absolutely.
And I believe they can share. Our next plan for the Kukoma Project is actually a U.S. house.
Oh, wow.
We want to prove up that this model works in multiple cultures and multiple socioeconomic spheres. Be a lot of tweaking.
Right.
From a third to a first world country, but
wow.
We'll see.
Wow. Well, that's just amazing. And I think what's so interesting is about our whole conversation today is we've been talking so much about all these projects that you're working on, all these passions that you have, and very little about, what you actually do day in and day out for your job.
From the day job.
For your day job. But I think that's a testament to you and what you've been able to do with your life and your life story, and being able to take those lessons that you've learned and be able to use it in a really, really positive way, which is really inspiring.
Well, thank you. And I think truly all of us, or not all of us have to at all, but I encourage all the women I mentor is to find a job you love, makes you happy, matches your passion with your skill set to make a living. And I don't think anybody raises their hand and says, I want to sell title insurance when I grow up. And I do think culture is very important. And I work with a group with great leadership and great culture. I wouldn't be there if that wasn't the case. You've got to get good enough at those first couple jobs to be able to pick that. And I think that's key. But I'm good at what I do, and I work hard, and it's given me a platform for the rest of this. And that's really important for me. I read something not very long ago. C.S. Lewis is one of my favorites, and I have a book that's just excerpts from C.S. Lewis, and he says, we work so we can give. And I thought, oh, that really resonates.
Yeah.
That is why I work.
Yeah. I remember when that clicked for me. It was actually right after my dad passed away. He died fairly young. I mean, he was 64. But it was amazing to see how so many people showed up. Just amazing. I mean, the line just out the door, just unbelievable how many people showed up and how many stories. It was just like he gave so much. And so I was like, you know what? I need to start giving back. I need to start spending time like focusing on other people. And so my husband and I, we started working with a group called Equest. Are you familiar with Equest?
I am.
A very, very cool organization. And we worked with a young girl actually named Sammy. A young girl who had Down syndrome. It was the most optimistic, beautiful, perfect little girl. And what they do is they utilize horses as a means of therapy. And whether it's
incredibly effective.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's physical therapy.
Incredibly effective.
It's emotional therapy. It's just unbelievable. And so when I started Connect 4, I decided that I'm gonna use Equest. I'm gonna give Equest 1% of my profits each year. Which I just got started, so I started like 6 months ago. So the check I'm going to hand them right away is not going to be very much, but I'm hoping I'm going to build.
That is not the most important part.
No, but it was, I knew that I wanted to give back. And, I launched Connect 4 on my dad's birthday. And
Perfect.
So it's all kind of
perfect.
Yeah. But once that clicks, it's kind of amazing. It just, your life becomes just so much richer.
And purposeful. I mean, because I think we tend to look at those things separately.
Yeah.
The work and the giving back. And they're really not.
Yeah, no.
They don't have to be.
No.
I don't think they should be. And again, that intersection for you was prompted by pain. It was losing your dad. And what a beautiful thing came out of that.
Absolutely. I know it's just, it's kind of fascinating. But when you talk about mentoring, I think that's such an important lesson and just understanding why you're doing it. Think about where and why you want to spend your time and who you want to help and what's really calling you. So I think calling you to Africa, yes, there's lots of things going on here in Dallas, but if you're called to Africa, then that's where you should be spending your time. So, we don't have to apologize for those things, which.
And we don't have to be angry if someone thinks otherwise,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, we covered a lot of ground today.
We did, and we both cried again.
I know. I knew that was going to happen, actually. I totally knew that was going to happen. This is my first ugly cry on the podcast, so we'll have to.
It wasn't ugly. It wasn't. I was watching you. It was not ugly.
Well, I'm just so thankful for our friendship. I am. Every time we talk,
too.
I feel like we just go deeper and deeper, and I learned so much from you, and you're such a gift to me, and I know to so many other people.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, and what you're doing here is a gift. I was telling, like I told you, your name's come up so much recently, so I can't even remember who I was talking to this morning. And I said something about at noon, I've got a podcast, and I asked what it was. And I know it was one of the ALC candidates that I'm interviewing for the Real Estate Council. And she actually didn't know you. And I told her who you were. And I said, she's this extraordinary woman who's literally doing 3 jobs right now. And I said, I don't even know how. And I said, I don't even know if I
I'm
could
like,
do
sounds
that.
like somebody I know.
So I don't think I could do that. So what you're doing is extraordinary. And I love this.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm learning a lot about myself and other people. So it's been really, really rich and meaningful to me. So.
And if our guinea pig video didn't work out, you're going to just scratch it and we're going audio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, this is the first time we're doing video. So thank you for being my guinea pig.
Happy.
I really
happy to do
appreciate it. Well, I feel like we have so much more to talk about, so we might have to do another episode.
We can do another
time.
episode, and we can do 10 lunches in between.
Great. Sounds good.
I love it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Emily.
Okay.